perspective. From Danzig to death, to Dark Throne to Dr. Shrinker. Buckle up, things are about to get heavy. This is the Metal Podcast. Let's rock and roll.
And welcome to a very special edition of the Metal Podcast. I am your host, of course, DJ, and I'm joined with, as always, my partner in legal crime, AC. How are you doing today?
The best crime. No one does legal crime as well as we do.
Exactly.
So it's only legal because you can't catch us.
Yes. It's only illegal if you get caught. But we have an incredible guest with us, and thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Zoltan Bathory, a Five-Finger Death Punch. And I'm not going to sell you short because we're going to get into the other things you're in, and you do at a very high level. But Zoltan, how are you today?
Very good, very good. Sitting in paradise, as you see.
Yes.
So can't complain.
Well, yes. Again, thank you so much. And along with being the founding member and rhythm guitarist of Five-Finger Death Punch, I am very intrigued that you are a high-level mixed martial artist. I actually trained jiu-jitsu for a little while, getting my butt kicked 3 times a week for about a couple years. So
all right.
I definitely respect that. And I'm curious what you started first. Either was it jiu-jitsu, judo, or was it playing guitar?
It was actually judo, but what I'm curious first, why did you quit?
I got really bad plantar warts that weren't going away, and then also my ligaments were starting to kind of get out.
But I give you a pass. All right.
Long story short, he got too old for it.
Then my sensei almost murdered me, but hey, that's a different story.
Well, we have that saying that you don't quit jiu-jitsu because you got old. You get old because you quit jiu-jitsu. We have that, yes. that low meme. Well, look, I started with judo, and judo was an Olympic sport. I grew up in Hungary. That was sort of a communist country at the time, at least when I was growing up. And so jiu-jitsu and all the martial arts I was interested in, it was not really available to us. But judo, being an Olympic sport, was state-sponsored. So I didn't have to pay for it, and it was easily available. I started with that when I was about 9 years old. Started to compete around when I was 11. And I would contribute a lot of things in my life, generally what I'm successful in, to martial arts, because martial arts rewires your mind. You see things very differently, and I think that mindset was actually one of the rocket fuel in my life that kind of propelled me to achieve what I achieved. It was really that martial art mindset.
Now, would you consider boxing a martial art?
Yeah, it is, I guess. It is a martial arts. It is a martial art. Yeah, I would say so. Say so, definitely. Because martial art, well, you know what? Let's put it this way. There is fighting and there is martial arts, right? If you're a good boxer, if you're a good fighter, maybe you are a good brawler, you can clean out a bar on a drunken Saturday, man. You get into it, right? Or whatever, right? So that makes you a fighter, but not a martial artist. I think actually a very good question. So now that I have to reconsider the answer to this, because I would say you're a martial artist if you also understand the philosophy of martial arts, right? So you can be a good fighter, but not a martial artist. But you become a martial artist when it permeates the rest of your life, when your philosophy and your outlook on life aligns with martial arts principles. Then you're a martial artist. So that would be I guess, the most correct answer that I can conjure up.
Because I would just add on to that, not just martial arts, but any kind of physical discipline, whether you're training like Olympic lifting or power lifting, something where there is a goal that you're going towards, not like someone who's like, oh, I'm into fitness, I go jogging, but something where you discipline your mind to reach the next level, essentially. I think that is kind of the missing link, I think, in most young people's lives. Is I think most schools should offer, I think the only thing they offer as far as self-defense is wrestling. which I think is still a good thing to know, because grappling, I think, is probably more important in a fight than punching. But boxing is something that is really good for young people to learn, because it's not just this is how you punch someone, because there's a lot of footwork and there's a lot of discipline involved. And I think having that mental discipline will improve all aspects of your life. And I do think it is important that everyone does learn martial arts, but I think people need to learn some kind of either combat skill or either power or Olympic lifting.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on the level that, you have to be able to defend yourself. You have to be able to defend your family or whatever is important to you. Like that's part of our, that should be part of our upbringing. That should be part of our life. The discipline part, obviously, will, especially if you start young, will realign your life, like what you're gonna become, right? Especially if you start early, but it's never late either. So you can always start any kind of martial arts. Now, if I'm looking at wrestling, I'm looking at boxing. It's actually an interesting thing that you're dabbling in, because I never thought of it this way, but now that we're talking about it, actually I would say there are sports, and definitely, sport where it's a sport with specific rules, right? Where I can do only certain things that not necessarily coming with philosophy beyond body mechanics and some basic philosophy of let's say about discipline and those things. But I think it becomes martial arts when it's a way of life.
When there's
right?
ideology.
I don't know, because would you consider like wrestling a way of life or boxing a way of life? I'm not
pro
sure
wrestling, I would consider professional wrestling a way of life.
I mean,
like WWE. That's my way of
right.
life.
That I don't know. Like what part of it? Like you go home like, woman, make food. I mean, I don't make food.
Well, it doesn't need to be wrestling for that. You can do that for anything. You could be into I guess you could be into like ham radio, and you can have that philosophy.
Right. Ham radio, that's how weird word coming in. But look, I mean, pro wrestlers are actually incredible athletes. Like a lot of people talk about pro wrestling, like this is fake. Then well, okay, yeah, it's choreographed to a degree, and it's a show, but that doesn't take away the athleticism, and it doesn't take away the discipline it takes to do that. Right. So not everybody can just jump in and say, like, you know what, I'm going to be a pro wrestler. That doesn't necessarily work that way. So I agree from the perspective of it takes a lot of work, a lot of discipline, a lot of physical abilities that you have to achieve. You were not born with, right? But as for martial art philosophy, let's say, let me give you some examples, right? So, growing up with judo, growing up with a sensei that was not just teaching us judo, but talking about martial art philosophy and the way of life and the principles of basically martial arts that they equate or parallel life with, right? So what happens if I want to make concrete examples, right? For example, I'm a little kid, and I have to go and fight another kid, right? At that moment, what happens? I can't run away, right? So I have to accept that this is happening, and this is happening right now, right? So I'm going to have to deal with what are the physiological effect of adrenaline and all that. I have to deal with that. I have to calm myself down, but I also have to accept that the part where this is going to happen. I can't brush this under the rug, right? So there is no procrastination here. This fight is going down right now. Then personal responsibility. Yeah, I have a sensei, and yeah, I'm training, but on the mat, it's me and the other kid, right? So I have to accept personal responsibility, and I have to do this myself. There's nobody to help, right? Then I might get into difficult positions, right? Am I going to give up here, or I'm going to fight through it? So you start learning that, well, I have to, and parallel that to life. It's a difficult position, but I'm going to have to fight through this position. And sometimes, when things look hopeless, what you're going to do? You keep fighting. So again, equate that to life. Aren't we doing that, or shouldn't we be doing that when things get difficult? And then as you're getting better and better, you start to see these things when they become sort of mechanical from the perspective of, I don't look at this fight anymore as, oh, this is an obstacle, or as it's, I start to look at it as a challenge. Like, oh, I have to fight this guy. And eventually it'd be like, the bigger the guy is, the more interesting it is, because, man, this is a big challenge now. Right? So obstacles become challenges. And then as you're getting even better, you start to see positions where, okay, it looks like I'm in trouble. Looks like I'm in a very bad position, but I'm going to fight my way out of it. And once you start to get better, you start to even change it into like, how do I use this to my advantage, right? It's a bad position, but I'm going to try to figure this out. How do I use a bad position to my advantage? How do I use your energy to my advantage, right? So that's when the mastery start to come in, like, okay, like whatever is happening, there is a perspective that I can find. It's my job to find a perspective where this situation doesn't look so bad, and where this situation might have an answer, and I can fight my way out of this, right? All those things start to get embedded in you and engraved in you, right? And that kind of translates to civilian life, so to speak. When you're not a martial artist, these things are automatic. And so, maybe actually later in life, I realized that I had these elements sort of built into me when I was a kid, when, you your behavior to other people. And I started to realize, like, I don't behave like most people around me. To me, when you say, oh, this is impossible to do, that's when I get excited. Oh, really? Well, let me try, right? So out of sudden, I start to be attracted to challenges, like something that somebody would say, like, this is not possible, or it's really difficult to do. Then it became interesting to me. That's kind of what I meant by, I think that personality that emerged from being a martial artist helped achieve this career, or achieved anything that I did in life, because I was, I escaped the matrix and the typical thinking of people around me, because I was a martial artist. So that's kind of what I meant by the philosophy of that sort of helped me to achieve things. And to this day, I look at the world that way. If you tell me that something is difficult, that's when I'm interested.
Well, think like, what is a fight really? It's basically another challenge that you need to overcome. Like, what is the difference between some guy saying, all right, I'm going to beat your buns, and a boss to a plumber saying, well, you need to have this done by 4 p.m. It's still something like, well, it's not done now, and I need to do this, and I can either accept defeat or failure. And you can fight someone and lose, just like you can try to fix a toilet and not know how to do it. And when you view life through that lens, things become so much simpler, and you just get way more confidence.
Correct. That's kind of what I'm talking about. That it becomes both. It becomes a chess game in your mind, right? Mm-hmm. And you start to assess the situation, and your reaction is also different. You don't give up your free will. When something happens to you, right? Something happens to you in life generally. Not you, but generally, I'm talking about people. So when something happens, a lot of people forget that you have a choice, right? You throw something at me, I can choose to get pissed off, or I choose to react or various ways. And when you just react to that event, without consciously thinking of that you had a choice, how do you react, right? Now, the shorter time, the faster you are, the faster your mind is, it's obviously the shorter time it takes, but to think about the reaction. But the reaction, right, it still should be a choice, right? So there is a chess game going on. Something is happening, and I am going to choose my reaction. So that's also part of martial arts. And when you're talking about, like, the plumber has a challenge, okay, you have to finish this job by 4 p.m., right? So then in this moment, right, this is a challenge now. You have to figure out that is a chess game, is that I am going to have to deal with my boss if I'm a plumber and I have a boss, right? And figure out how to mitigate the situation, right? And so maybe it's a mental chess game. Can I figure this out that I don't have to finish it, or I can prove that it can be done by 4 p.m., right? Or I have to find a possibility. Like, I take it as a challenge. Like, okay, well, let's see if I can, in fact, do this by 4 p.m., right? But you have to have that moment when you make a decision how I'm going to deal with this that arise. Instead of your boss says like, hey, it has to be done by 4 p.m. and you have an immediate reaction and you either get aggressive or, that's not possible, throw your hand in the air, or, like you could have a reaction that was compulsory versus a reaction that you chose. And I think that's kind of where the difference start emerging, that if you're a martial artist, most likely that you actually made a conscious choice on how you reacted to that situation. That's a pretty distinctive, even in a physical fight, right? Like if you got into it, like you were just saying, like, okay, you get into a physical altercation. Okay, I have choices, right? So it's not like adrenaline dumps and I start to just do whatever, happens. No. I have choices. And I make those decisions.
How do you feel about Kimbo Slice as a fighter, not a person, just as a fighter?
Well, interesting question. I saw that it was going around the internet. I saw his fights, the backyard ones, right? So yes. I saw those two. Look, he was a physically capable guy who had enough experience that he was pretty good at fighting in a backyard. So now once you converted Kimbo into the UFC, and he had to fight professional fighters, that equation changed pretty quickly, right? Because he's still a physically capable guy, and he knows, he's a brawler. He knows how to throw down. But there's a massive difference between somebody that has the street experience going up against fighters that are professionally trained. Because I guess that the different branches of the two. One came from experience, and an experience will what is this experience that you have, right? Who you fought before. If you fought other brawlers, right, then that's your experience. Then you know how other brawlers will approach a fight. Versus, if you fought other professional fighters, their behavior is very different from brawlers, right? And so even this part of like, okay, Kimbo had experience, but what kind of experience he had? He had experience with other guys who were not really trained fighters, right? So he is accustomed to your specific behavior. And professional fighters, what we do really is that I know that what kind of behavior you're going to throw a haymaker. You're going to do certain things, right, naturally. And basically most of martial arts, exactly what we do. I know what most of the people who get into a fight untrained will exhibit certain things. And I am going to train against all those things. I'm going to exploit every one of those things that you're naturally going to throw at me. That is kind of the first level of martial arts. So I can eliminate, because there's a self-defense part to some degree, I can eliminate the guys who are not trained. Because they all throw the same haymaker. They all do the same exact motion, because it's almost like it's genetically somehow is in there in some way, right? And so that's the first level of martial arts, that you learn what they're going to do and you're going to exploit that, right? So if Kimbo comes from like even though he had a lot of experience of backyard fighting, he's still not fighting professionals. A professional will approach this completely differently, right? And then now it's a chess game, right? So again, physically he's very capable. It was very capable, very strong guy. Obviously, you eat one punch from him, you're gonna feel that, or you wake up the next day, or, in the next universe, next, hopefully, right? In the next dimension, in the next dimension, you know what I mean? So you should have, you eat a pound of mushrooms or get a punch from Kimbo Slice. It takes you to the same place. It's another dimension. So anyway, but see, that's kind of my point. There's like in a second he was was going against professional fighters. He could have, he didn't really have the time to develop, right? He passed before he could, but he, as he converted to professional fighting, obviously he started trained professionally. So I think if he had a couple of more years, eventually he would become great, right? I don't think he had the time. He wasn't alive, unfortunately, long enough to to get to that level. He could have. He was, he had experience, and he was very strong and capable. But you can see those fights, like there was a lacking that experience of fighting professionals.
And I think that goes into the difference between the fighter and the martial artist, because martial arts, it is an ideology, and it is just as much, probably more so, training of the mind rather than training of like the body, because you need to be able to calculate what is coming next. And if you're just strong and you can, if you're like some guy like, oh, in a professional fight, I could never land a punch, but if I do.
Right.
Yeah, right. You don't want to be so one-dimensional. That's what I appreciate about you, Zoltan, that you're so versatile. I mean, we're good. Thank you for coming on our music show. We're going to talk music, but
I enjoy this. So
I genuinely did it.
I have the time, so it's be good.
Oh, good. Yeah. Okay. So
before DJ goes on, DJ and I don't talk about what we are going to talk about with guests. So I actually wanted to divert it to the martial arts thing. That was my goal in this. Yeah, I'm game. I love talking about this. So it's be good. We can keep going. Be good.
So it's funny with I had this roommate from Colombia in college, and he was just chiseled. Like he could work out, just looked perfect, right? Like it just crazy physique. And we'd work out, and it was before I started even doing jujitsu. Like I played a little bit of professional baseball, but in college, they'd make us run a lot and condition. And he's like, "Hey man, like let's race, like I want to race you." Like, I'm like, oh, okay. And I literally, like, before he could take like 5 steps, I was gone. Like he had no chance. And he was the most unathletic person I ever met. And all he would do was lift weights. He tried playing dodgeball. He couldn't throw the ball. And he would complain like, "Man, I just suck at sports." But he really wanted to go out there and play. And I never knew what to do for him, because I could throw a ball. I mean, I don't like soccer, but I could play it if I wanted. But he was just stuck on just lifting weights, and but it was
this so funny. This is the step down from Kimbo Slice, where all you are is you just look strong.
Yes,
right. Yeah, look, then even there are different level of intelligence, right? So you can attain a level of intelligence where you understand how to build your body, right? That takes and I'm talking about in a closed circuit. That takes within that, it's a certain level of knowledge and intelligence that you start to figure out. First is knowledge, and then you intuitively start to know things, and you know how to use this knowledge. Then we can use it. Intelligence is how you use your tool, not actually having the tool, right? So you start building the body. Then you comes a higher level, of that intelligence when you can exploit that, right? So I kind of understand body mechanics. I know what way, your body will bend or not. So it's a little bit beyond learning techniques, because you can learn certain techniques. Like, here's a kimura, here's a whatever techniques I throw at you, and you learn mechanically how this works. Then eventually you start to see that's what takes the intelligence. You start to see that, like, oh, I know this technique kimura, but it works in 10 different directions and positions. I can also execute this, right? And then intuitively you start to understand even more about body mechanics when you kind of start inventing moves to a certain degree. Like you just know what can be done and how it moves. And so you start to escalate your evolution on that body intelligence, when you understand how to build your body, how to be strong, how to exploit your opponent's weaknesses, and then how to start to implement techniques in various ways that wasn't even taught to you, right? And then eventually start to even invent moves or modify moves for your particular body type, right? But it's all still in this frame. And then I think the next level, when you start to cross over to, like, now you become a martial artist, when you start to see the parallel between what you're doing on the mats or in a ring. You start to see the parallel between your life and your other endeavors or whatever else you do in life. You start to see parallels. You start to recognize patterns, basically, right? And then you start to understand, like, well, yeah, I'm a martial artist and I know these techniques, but there is a pattern to those. right? And there's a chess game that you play, and those elements appear in other things. So if you start to, you're like, okay, what is music, snowboarding, and martial arts has common, right? Rhythm, patterns, balance, right? It's the same thing, kind of, right? So that you're gonna start recognizing these patterns in everything, and that's where I feel like you're becoming a martial artist once you understand that all these things are sort of include the same kind of patterns on a deeper level. I think that's when I would call somebody a martial artist, when somebody start to really understand that.
Wow. Do you like any professional wrestling?
If you're talking about professional wrestling as
I
WWE,
mean WWE, like sports entertainment wrestling, not like gold medal, whatever.
All right, so I didn't understand that when I came to America. It was very foreign to me. Like, what are these guys doing? And what, so I didn't grow up in that. So for me, it was very strange. Like, what's the point of this, right? And believe it or not, at one point, I used to make merchandise for the WWF when it was still called WWF, right? So
golden years.
I was on, I was a designer, art director, and I was creating a lot of these merchandise for these guys. And like back in the times, like, man, like Saber, remember Saber, and then Cactus Joe and
Cactus Jack.
Stone Cold was Cactus Jack, or So so that was the time, right? And I didn't really understand, but I did recognize, like, man, it takes a lot of athleticism. It's a lot of careful choreography. I mean, like, I'm still surprised in some way, like, how these guys don't get hurt. And I know a couple of guys,
they do.
Well, I mean, not hurt to the level that I think they.
Oh, right.
Not that they should be, but they could be. Like I'm seeing these insane jumps, and like, man, that's. I mean, I train pretty heavy martial arts, but man, I don't know. So I absolutely recognize the athleticism and what it takes. So I wouldn't call it fake.
It's not fake.
It's choreography. It's a show, but man, I would challenge anyone who's talking crap about it. Like, just jump in there. Just do like 1/10 of what they do. So no, I absolutely recognize it. I'm not a connoisseur, definitely not. I'm not really following it, but I do appreciate their abilities. Insane. Like, there's some high level athleticism that's happening there.
Yeah, I think if someone says, "Oh, it's fake," that's really a low IQ thing, because the reason that people would say it's fake, because there was a time when it was a secret that it was choreographed, because it was advertised as it was real, and that was kind of like a carnival secret. Like, oh yeah, like, these guys are punching each other. Oh, they hate each other. This guy's actually stealing this guy's wife and kids. So that was kind of the mystique. And then I want to say they wanted to do a show in, maybe it was New Jersey, it was something like that, but there was a state where there was a ban on PEDs for sports. Mm-hmm. So Vince McMahon had to come out and say, like, oh, no, it's not sports, it's just sports entertainment. And that's what kind of lifted the veil for that. But I think there's kind of a bell curve where it's like you're a little kid and you're like, wow, it's real. And then, you get older and you're like, oh, no, this is fake. But then you get even older and you're like, wow, like, this is scripted, but these guys are jumping around and then they're like crashing into each other. And when you understand, like, physical ability, it can't, like, some of that stuff can't be fake. Obviously, you can see the cheap punches or the cheap stomps, but
I mean, like, you know what? I'm gonna back you up on this, right? So because what you're saying, I agree with you. It is choreographed to a degree, but it's still there's a lot of chance. There's a lot of injury can happen. So this is still, there's still a massive factor that accident can happen, and it's still high level of physical abilities. But when I'm gonna back you up on this, so is Formula One, the race, is that real, right? So because with the same equation, when when whatever team says like, hey man, we need Lewis Hamilton to win this, so fall back or hold up the other guys. See what I mean? So his teammate could possibly beat him, but he's not going to because the team principal will say, hey, we need the points, so you need to fall back. So is that fake? So yeah, we could talk, you know what I mean? So we can pick apart, and nobody would think that Formula One is fake. It isn't, but there are situations where one guy could win, but they're not going to let him win because the team need the point, or they want the world champion to be world champion, and he needs these points. So the teammate will just hold up the rest of the cars, right, to create distance so their guy can win. And it happens all the time. I just, like when, okay, this is Carlos Sainz going to win, so the crowd, you have to, hold the crowd. It happens. Doesn't make it fake, right? Is it choreographed? Well, kind of on the go, yeah, it is, So yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where there is still a wild factor that it can't be completely choreographed. There are some things that are, up for chance. So, so yeah, I would agree with you. It isn't fake. It is an entertainment though. There is some part of it is obviously choreographed.
I call it stuntman soap opera.
Yeah, okay. That's good.
Let's go with that. Yeah, you know who Triple H is?
Yes.
Yeah, he in the middle of a match, he tore his quad and he kept going. So it's like you don't actually like fake a huge injury like that. And like those guys get hurt all the time, and yeah. People can say like, oh, they get hurt from fake things. Like, well, it's not really fake. It's just not a competition. They're not actually competing for, like, you don't earn that belt. It's not like a UFC belt. Right.
And you know what? We all guilty with that. Keep going. I mean, this is you train jiu-jitsu, so you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
This is a common thing because we get injured and we like, oh, it's not so bad. Let's keep training. Man, I trained on a broken fibula for 2 months. Oh. I didn't really know it was broken. I mean, I felt it, but like when you're a martial artist, things always hurt. You're never 100%, right? And then I finally went to a doctor, like, hey man, can you look at this thing because it's still, and he's like, yeah, well, it's broken. so yeah, of course, you feel it. I walked around and competed with a broken toe for a couple of months. Same thing. I went to the chiropractor and I'm like, hey man, can you I think it's just out of the place. Can you put it back? And he looks at it like, dude, that's broken. Go get an x-ray. And I didn't. Of course I didn't, because I'm an idiot. So, like, like flesh wound. You know what I mean? It's like
you can't compete if you go to the doctor. I mean, come on.
Right.
That jerk is going to bench you. What does he know,
So yeah, right. So I'm like thinking I'm Monty Python. You know what I mean? Like, man, flesh wound doesn't matter.
Exactly.
So I kept going, and then I go finally, I'm like, you know what? Okay, fine. I get an X-ray. Fine. So I got an X-ray, and they took their sweet time. So I was about to leave. I was like halfway at the door when the doctor, hey, come back. I'm like, what? It's like, okay, bro, we got a problem here. It's like it's not your, it's not just your toe is broken. It is broken off. I'm like, what do you mean broken off? I mean, it's right there.
It's right there.
The only things that are holding it is just the ligaments. Like the bone has like a 1/4 in separation. I'm like, oh, okay. So can I still compete? Like, no, I mean, so we are all idiots like that, So I had so many injuries. In fact, the funniest one, I broken ribs and this and that. So I was touring and I had a broken rib. So there were all these pictures like me with the face, like, and it's pretty funny because people are like, man, he really enjoys playing that guitar. It's like, no, man, I'm crapping my pants from the plane. That's what you see on my face. Those are actually real, like I could barely get out of bed, but the show has to, show keeps going. It has to happen. So yeah, we all go through these injuries. So actually, Triple H, yeah, man, how we roll. You just keep going.
Yeah, he deserves to be at the head for that. Yeah, I experienced the same thing. Like I play tennis and I broke my finger playing, and I say, well, I can still hold a racket with two fingers. So that's what I did. Is I just taped my pinky and my ring finger together, and I just kind of held it with my my middle and index finger. And I lost a lot of accuracy and power that way, but I was able to play enough. I was okay in doubles, and recently I got a hernia, and I still have that. And I was like, initially, I was like, maybe it's
still squatting.
Yep. And I was like, right. Maybe I don't have a hernia, and then I'll just keep playing.
I hear you. I do that all the time too. Like, maybe it's not that, right?
Yeah, maybe.
But you know what? I think, when I propose that the three of us should nominate duct tape for Nobel Prize as medicine. Because, man, how many times that happens? Yes. Well, it kind of hurts, but I'm going to just duct tape it. I think that should get a Nobel Prize for medicine. Duct tape.
Duct tape is more reliable than the doctors I've been seeing about my hernia.
Well, there you go.
Maybe I should just duct tape it down. I could just wrap it around myself. Like it's basically a truss. Just tape it all in.
Hey,
keep my guts from falling out.
Is basically a rupture of the mesh that holds your stomach together. So technically, I would say, people don't take advice from us. We're just talking out of ours. But
this is sports entertainment.
Duct tape. Yeah, this is exactly. This is not professional. It's not choreographed, but just duct tape it up. Man.
No, it's medical entertainment. That's what it is.
It's medical. That's perfect.
It's not actually medicine. It's medical entertainment.
Medical. That's good. That's good. Let's go with that.
Now, DJ, you actually wanted to talk about something? Because we did cut you off. Yeah. Actually, you know what? Before you do, this is the reason I wanted to bring up WWE. Is they did a thing in the late 90s called the Brawl for All, where they just picked, I think it was 8 guys, maybe it was 16, I'm not sure, but they picked them to do an actual fighting, like boxing. And one guy who fought Golden Globes, do you know who Dan Severn is?
Yes, of course.
Okay, yeah. So he was one of the fighters, and he won the first round, and then he just bowed out, saying like, "Too much could go wrong. I'm fighting against a bunch of 300 pounders of solid muscle that are just barroom brawlers. So I don't know if this is a safe thing." So he backed out, and then they were just left. It was one guy who fought Golden Gloves, Golden Gloves, and 14 untrained fighters that were essentially just barroom brawling. But one of them, and I thought of this because DJ was talking about his roommate, there was a guy, he was just a bodybuilder. So he didn't have any real mobility. He just looked good with his shirt off. And so he just looked really awkward. So you just get these guys that really had no fighting training, but they were all 6'7", 320 pounds, just throwing haymakers. And so many of them got hurt. Like one guy, his career was basically over. And the only guy who knew how to fight was like, I don't think this is a good idea. Just gonna leave.
So I assume that's why it is not a series. It was just one time.
No, they did a whole thing. They did 16. It was 16 men. So I guess that's 4 rounds of it. And the audience wasn't really into it because it wasn't like watching like an actual boxing event where these are boxers who know how to box. It was like watching amateur fighting. It was like, I guess it's like watching bum fights. So it was just really brutal and uncomfortable. And one guy, he got knocked out and his legs started jumping.
That happens, yeah.
and they tried to get him with the smelling salts and had no effect on him. So the audience was like, "Oh my gosh, this is like the first time we're seeing these guys genuinely get injured," and it's a really embarrassing moment for the company. they just ruined a bunch of people's lives over it.
But if you want to look at WWE wrestlers coming into real professional, look, I mean, Brock Lesnar did come into the UFC, and he
did well enough.
Yeah, he did well, and that's the point. Like, like he was strong and athletic. Well, he's huge too, but he was strong and athletic enough, and he fought guys that are almost his size. You know what I mean? So he I mean, there were a couple of big fights, and like look at Frank Mir. Frank Mir got him. I think if maybe it was a heel hook or a leg lock. I don't remember, but he was taken out mainly with technical stuff that he would really know that it's coming. You know what I mean? Like, you have to be a fairly sophisticated, highly trained martial artist to see that when, oh man, I'm, like a heel hook is about to happen, or a leg lock is about to, be slapped on, right? You kind of have to see that coming. But as for his athleticism, as his strength,
he's a freak.
He held his own, man. He held his own. So it's, so that kind of shows you that if he had a little bit more time and training more, like mixed martial arts, and get a little jiu-jitsu in there, he would have been he was a force of nature, but he could have even done much better.
Yeah, and I think he just did it on a whim, because he went to play for the Vikings. Like, he just I'm gonna, like, I haven't played football in 10 years. I think I'm just gonna go play for the Minnesota Vikings. And then they cut him before the season started, but the guy is a freak, like Kimbo Slice. Like, that's just, not everyone can enter the octagon and do that well. And and there's a few people like Dan Severn is a legend in UFC, and still Ken Shamrock was also a solid fighter. And a lot of these guys, they do it, probably they go to WWE because it's safer, but they are already trained to do that, because you pretty much have to just be a tough guy that knows how to make sure a guy you're dealing with doesn't get hurt while you choreograph your fake wrestling.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, a lot of these physical elements translate. Like, you're not necessarily, you're not a martial artist yet, but you kind of you hold your own, and it works from, like, there are a couple of break dancers, right? There are a couple of guys who were professional break dancers coming into jiu-jitsu, and they did really, really well because they already have the agility, the balance, and like, if like the 10th Planet guys, there are a couple of guys. Boogie, one of them, and the other, his brother is Gio. They were professional, professional breakdancers, man. And they got to black belt really quickly, much faster than anyone I ever seen in 3-4 years or so. And it's not like they just got awarded a black belt. These guys are annihilating people in competitions. See what I mean? So it's not just like, well, here's a black belt. You know what I mean? Plus in jiu-jitsu, you don't get a black belt if you're not there, right? We keep that very sacred, And so, these guys came from breakdancing, but they're so agile, and their balance and their motion is so fluid already, because they brought that with them, that now they just had to learn some techniques, man. And they were like, they're lethal, both of those kids. Well, so it's a lot of these things translate.
Yeah. And like you said, with technique, you're very, technical. You have carefully crafted riffs with Five Finger Death Punch. I mean, even in 2010, you were named Golden God's best shredder by Metal Hammer magazine. But it's interesting. A lot of times when I've always thought, hey, that guy shreds. Like, that's a good thing. Like, that means you're good at guitar. But some people have kind of said that, oh, if that guy shreds means like he's just like can play fast and is kind of sloppy. But I don't know when that like term kind of changed. But I mean, I believe that's a huge compliment to get that by Metal Hammer, and that's amazing. And I mean, you're an incredible musician. I mean, what's kind of like next for you? Like, where do you go up from there with Five Finger Death Punch and personally with music?
I mean, look, so here's the thing. Obviously, you do have to have the musical ability, right? So when you have the musical ability, and I'm gonna put in there, you can write a hit song with 4 chords. In fact, most of the hit songs are 4-chord songs, right? So and a lot of those songs are actually the same chords too. So so you can do that, but when you get proficient on an instrument, at least your ideas are not held back by your ability. So it's not that I can only play this. It's like I can play anything, but I choose to play this, right? So I believe that you do have to have the proficiency. You have to be mechanically able to play the things that so it's not a hinder on your imagination. And then once you learn to play like that and you choose to write a 4-chord, hit song, then awesome, right? But I think it's important that you, as a musician, you master your instrument, right? That Metal Hammer award, interesting because I'm not the typical shredder, let's say like Yngwie Malmsteen, right? Like I'm not the lead kind of shredder, right? When I was a kid, I was a huge fan of that, Vinnie Moore, Yngwie Malmsteen, all those guys, and incredible players. And I was a big fan of that. I was trying to play those things, and I got pretty good, right? So I could play not as good, but fairly, in the ballpark somewhere, right? And there, I remember when I start to understand that, well, this is great, but being a songwriter and being a shredder is not the same, right?
Right.
So because you can really play, it doesn't make you a great songwriter. Songwriting is a completely different skill. It's a completely different understanding, and that's what I meant by you do have to have the technical ability to play and do the things that you imagine. But the songwriter has a very different way to approach music, and what that is, what songwriting is not the same thing. And just to give you an example how songwriters should and actually do think, songwriters that are successful, most of them think this way. That give you an example, let's say pick out Vivaldi's Four Seasons, right?
Yes.
I can play you any of the parts and you will be able to tell me which one is winter, which one is summer, right? So you can actually pick the seasons, which one that is, right? So with that lyrics, just with the music, this composer can communicate very complex ideas and feelings, and or you can go down the list of Wagner, Tchaikovsky, all these guys, all these guys had to write music without vocalists, yet give you a vibe, communicate some kind of a complex story. How are you going to do that with just music, right? So there is that aspect. Like you do have to understand, how to reach in and change somebody's mood. How to do this? How do I tell you a story with just the music, right? And so that's one part. Then comes and then it has all the sub. How do this happen? You have to understand that major chords are generally happy, minor chords are kind of sad. Then the rhythmical patterns of things. If I play your guitar riff and the drums on that guitar riff is a little bit lazy, like the snare comes a little bit lazy, it's like a shuffled beat on it, right? You're gonna have this feeling of like, oh man, we're cruising, good times, right? If I take the same guitar riff and I tighten up the drums, quantize it, it comes right on times. Now you have this feeling of elation of like, man, let's go to war, let's march, let's go, right? Because that's what the music will give you. And if I speed up the drums, again, it's barely audible. So it's more of feeling than an actual hearing. That's the snare maybe comes a little bit too early, but you can't really hear it, but you feel it. And I'm going to actually give you a feeling of anxiety with that, right? Because that's it's like, oh man, it's right. Yeah. So that gives you
anxiety.
So right. So now imagine it's like I gave you three different, feelings. Kind of chilling, right, with the shuffle beat. The let's go to war, kind of like pumped up, and anxiety. So this is three colors that I'm already playing with. Let's say the verse, I can make you anxious in a verse with just the music, no lyrics yet, and then I'm dropping it into a shuffle beat in the chorus, and that it gives you this feeling of relaxation. Right? You have to understand these things, and I didn't even talk about again major chord, minor chords, the feeling that extra dimensions that come on top on it, right? And then this is just the music, so I'm physiologically affecting how you feel. I didn't even say a word yet, right? So that's what I got interested in. Okay, I can play my instruments, I can shred, as you said, but I'm much more interested in how do I communicate these feelings just with the music, right? And I'm a huge fan of like Ennio Morricone and Hans Zimmer and people who write soundtracks, because then that's what it's the most obvious. If the soundtrack is wrong, man, it kills the movie. It destroys the movie. Yeah. If the soundtrack is good, then you don't notice it. When the soundtrack is excellent, it adds to the movie, right? So I'm a big fan of soundtracks because that's a very typical area when it's very obvious if you're doing it right or wrong, right? And so that's how it works for me, like understanding that. Then there's another element of, the harmonies, melodies, and what are the things that affecting people a very specific way. And again, I'll give you an example. If I play a piece of music and you say, oh, it sounds like it's a surf music, it should be a soundtrack for a surf movie, right? Or I play you some dissonant, crazy sounding things like, oh, this is a soundtrack for a horror movie. And then comes the question, were we trained by society that you're going to say that this is a soundtrack for a horror movie because you saw so many horror movies and this was the kind of music? Or if you played it to somebody who never seen a horror movie, would they know? Would they know that
I have the answer for that.
Yeah, go ahead.
The movie Jaws, they show it to people without the music, and people were laughing at it.
Right.
But you add the music, and it creates a sense of dread. So there are. I know there's one movie. It came out like 10 or something years ago. I don't know, but the whole movie had no music. So I think it is the music creates the dread. And another example is.
Then let me ask you this then. So if you were playing this music without the movie, so now let's reverse it. Like you're playing the music only, not seeing the movie. Would you know, right? Would you naturally know that this movie, but this song belongs to a scary movie? Or,
yes.
Right? Now, and the next question then, did you learn that because you saw so many scary movies? Or would a person, if you went to the jungle and met a tribe that never had contact with society or civilization, so to speak, right? Modern civilization, would they know?
Yes.
Is it genetic? Is it just we just feel that way that somehow we feel that the cymatic patterns that are coming at us are dissonant and somehow dark? And do we understand that physiologically, or is it something learned? Right?
No,
it's an interesting question.
It is an interesting question, but and of course this question, there's no answer. That's just my opinion. Is I think they would, because they've done it for so long with movies, trying to kind of perfect the formula of what type of movie gets this type of song, whether it's for a scare or a tear or a cheer. Pick your emotion, and then it's all fine tuned because music is a science,
right?
So there is a way to kind of play with people's emotions. So I think specifically if you went to like a jungle tribe that have no interaction with music, and you played I don't know, pick maybe Jaws, just the Jaws theme comes to mind. I think they would get a feeling of dread, like, oh my gosh, I'm not comfortable with this. And it's another thing with that is not just playing, this type of music, but let's say you have a piano and then you're playing, I don't know, pick Bach. You're just playing something nice and major, simple. It feels calming and soothing. But if you were to just jam your hands on all the keys violently, it would create a sense of anxiety, because these notes aren't supposed to go together. The cohesion of the scale sets the tone of the room. So that's why in the dentist's office they're not playing Slayer, because they want you to be relaxed when they're drilling your teeth. Although that would be kind of funny if Hell Awaits started playing. Someone sat down in the chair.